Welcome everyone to Overcome Podcast, episode 45. Today, I have a pleasure to talk to my friend, black belt in Judo, Dr. Austin Cook.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey Austin, the main theme around this podcast is overcome, and practicing judo for so many years, and then going to the medical school. I think you can draw some correlations between the life of an athlete and the recovery and some of the injuries. So let's get started with going back a little bit for your days as an athlete. Did you ever had any major injury that you had to stop training and then recover for a long time, or you were pretty health all the time?
Yeah, so when I was younger, one of the reasons I started judo actually was because I injured my knee wrestling. Um, and so that was, in some ways, the death of one sort of athletic pursuit I has, but had, but the birth of another. And so started judo. And that was sort of the real only injury I had for a while. Then later on in judo, I did have some more knee surgeries, which required a meniscal repair and then an ACL reconstructive surgery, and but not as bad as a lot of other
But
athletes
the ACL
face.
is
And
was caused by a specific movement, or it was just overuse?
yeah, it was a sort of an acute on chronic injury. I had previously had a partial tear, and then as my training was escalating, I was getting ready for a tournament and fighting one of my teammates who has just spectacular technique and just great judo. I went in for something though. We kind of got intertwined. Our legs got tied up, and then fell to the mat with them kind of interlocked like that. I heard a pop, and yeah, that required a surgery that I was out for 6 months for. But uh, yeah, I mean, just as far as though kind of the grand scheme of things, not as bad as a lot of other athletes have
But
had, but at the time it seemed like a
yeah,
big
but how
deal.
long it took you for to be fully recovered and training again?
So 6 months actually, which is a little bit atypical. I pushed it quite a lot. Typically, it takes for a sport like judo maybe 9 months to really get back to where you're competition ready. But I was sort of nearing the end of a period where I really had to make a decision whether was I going to go to medical school right away, or was I going to uh, continue to do judo, and I needed more data before I made that decision. And so there was a World Cup in El Salvador, which was my first tournament back. So at around 6 months um, after my surgery, and ended up going to that, and ended up going better than I expected it would. But
How
yeah,
how how
six
how
months, which
old
is a
are,
little
how
bit.
old are you at that time?
So I was around that would be 2023.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
recovery time during this age is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 30 now, and I can already feel that I'm experiencing the wear and tear of just a lifetime of combat sports, and I'm sure I have more to look forward to,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. But when you went to the medical school, did you study anything specific to athletics, or you just kind of start pushing to this side just because you like it?
So the way it sort of works in medical school in the U.S. is it's pretty generalized. You have 4 years where you just have a pretty standardized curriculum compared to everybody else, no matter what specialty you end up going into. Um, I was always interested in sports and kind of the overlap between medicine and sports, but I don't know. I just never really. I don't know. When I stopped doing judo, it just kind of at first became just not quite as big of a part of my life, and I think uh, I kind of pushed it to the side, and then ended
And
up sneaking back up on me, and in the last few months, really started getting into it again, and
yeah,
uh,
because you were you
yeah, so
were
kind
you
of
were
came full
really
circle.
focused on your school, which is great. But On the other hand, now that you're done, you're like, wow, I still like doing this thing, right? And now with this background, this from the school, you can start putting those both together, right? So what is really your plan now to align both uh, disciplines, right, in your career?
Um, so kind of, I don't know, I guess if I were to judge both sports and healthcare from having not been so immersed in them, I would have thought that they were pretty different, especially a sport like judo, right? Where I mean, it's a combat sport. You're sort of training so that if you get into a situation where you can, if it's in a fight, then you can do
Hmm.
damage, right? I mean, there's submissions, there's throws. It's a pretty dangerous and pretty violent at times sport. But I think what I liked the most about judo, and I always have, was uh, just the sort of kind of benefits and both physical and mental health that accompany training. Um, and both in terms of camaraderie amongst teammates, setting goals, accomplishing goals, just just I mean natural endorphins that you get that are sort of effectuated by working out, and in many ways that's very similar to what healthcare hopes to provide to people,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Is giving them the healthiest and happiest life possible, and so I think they're actually not so different after all, and I didn't always realize it. I mean, I started judo because I wanted to be able to fight and like, be look cool and uh you don't I didn't really realize it at the time, but I think I think it's pretty
Well,
similar.
there is also the other aspect, right? Which is about, in my opinion, is about if you are a doctor focused on athletes, you can also help from the longevity perspective, right? What can an athlete do to stay longer in the game over the years? What type of recovery? What type of things that can be done to even prevent injury? Because I'm pretty sure you've seen many injuries over the years practicing judo, not on you, but on your teammates and in other people, right? So, what can be done to reduce the likelihood of injuries? What can be done once you're injured to recover faster and come back?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's almost it's a really broad question because I think even kind of just the term injury itself can be broken down into so many different kind of types of, I mean, you can classify it in so many ways, right? You can have injuries to the brain, you can have injuries to your joints, you can have injury to your organs, you can have you can have chronic. And so, but I think generally speaking, when we're talking about athletics and sports, is the sort of orthopedic injuries that accompany either an acute blow or a sort of gradual wear and tear on a joint. And so acute acute injury wise, it also really depends kind of where it happens, um, and depends on the sport. I mean, so any particular joint that you had a question?
No, no. I'd like to use your experience. Like, what are the
Yeah.
most traditional ones that you've seen over the years for in this case for judo?
So in judo, we see a lot of knees, right? So ACL, MCL, meniscal tears. Typically, those, if they're bad enough, they require surgery. The recovery is uh, pretty similar for a lot of them, and sometimes one co-occurs with the other, right? So you can have an ACL tear, and then you can have a meniscal tear that happens at the same time. Um, if you're gonna repair the actual structure in the knee that was damaged, and so for an ACL, that means just connecting the ligament that was partitioned, and for a meniscal tear, same thing, except sewing the meniscus back up. The recovery can take around 6 months. With meniscal tears, so the cartilage in your knee that can become damaged, you have the option to uh, just take out the portion that was damaged. So, and I had one of those actually too. It's called a minisectomy. Um, the data is pretty good actually. Sometimes there's a little bit of a concern for increased risk of arthritis later down the line, but Just depends on the situation. That it can be a couple weeks before you're back working out. So
When the
typically, if
athlete
you're
comes back, for example, in your case or in other case, uh, there is any restriction, any limitation, or pretty much can do everything that he was able to do in the past?
so I think typically, I mean, broad strokes, obviously, but I think 90 for a young athlete. So in my case, if I was 23, 24 when this happened, you can usually get to about 90%
Hmm.
of what you were. If you're lucky, sometimes people can get to 100%. I probably got to 80 or 90. Um, but you just adjust whatever your game is to kind of compensate for the loss of function in a certain realm. So, for example, Tai Toshi, I know that's how you hurt your ankle, right?
My foot. Yeah,
Your
yeah.
foot, yeah, your foot. Um, I used to do Tai Toshi too, and then when I hurt my ACL, I couldn't do it anymore just because of the stress that places on the knee. And so I just couldn't do Tai Toshi
But
anymore.
wait
But
a minute, you couldn't do it because you felt pain or because your mind was too concerned to, injury again.
Yeah,
It
that's
was more a
another,
physical condition or psychological condition.
I think probably it starts as, well, I guess it can happen both ways. And sometimes it can happen together, right? You try a throw, you sort of feel that twinge, then you second guess yourself, try it again, and maybe you're primed to be even more sensitive to not wanting to do that movement. I think for me, it was mostly physical and me just realizing that, oh, that did not feel stable. And then my body kind of just instinctually said, we're not going to go to that position anymore. So maybe it actually is a little bit of both. But uh,
But
yeah,
it is definitely physical because you said that you felt unstable. So that's a pretty good trigger, right? You're like, whoa, this is not unstable.
right, right. And then yeah, so
What about
uh,
Uchimata? Because Uchimata also you are with one leg only.
yeah, so for me, I'm a righty, and it was my right leg. So whenever the reaping leg that you Haraigoshi, Uchimata, Osotogari, that is typically the one that isn't supporting the body.
Oh yeah, okay.
But with Uchimata, sometimes the supporting leg, you're supporting both you and or your and your opponent's weight. So luckily, I was a righty, and it was my right knee that was damaged. Otherwise, I think I would probably have had to switch to left. Um, but yeah, what about you though? How does your ankle feel when you're on the mat and
Yeah,
getting back into it?
for throws like Uchimata, I have to go lefty for sure. But
Yeah,
Tayatoshi, I feel good because I'm a righty, so it's my left leg. So so
right,
it doesn't really hurt or anything, and it's really not in the ankle itself; it's on the foot, right? Because it's the Linz-Frank. In the Linz-Frank is
right,
like that ligament right on the foot, so it's more on the foot. Now,
right.
did you lose any mobility on your knee, or mobility came back just fine?
Yeah, it actually came back pretty well. I was hitting physical therapy really hard. Um, I probably put in maybe 3, 4 hours a day of just actively engaging the joint, and I mean, I took it really, really seriously. Uh, so yeah, I mean, mobility wise, it wasn't really. I mean, in ACL reconstructive surgery, often you don't want much mobility, right? Because if there's a lot of mobility in the joint, um, that can sort of be the issue. And the sort of point of an ACL is to have the knee move in a very orchestrated, predefined plane. And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
but it's not like that your knee was you lost the range of motion that you had in the past. So you recovered the entire range of
right.
motion, right?
Right. Yeah, range of motion. So like flexion, I had full flexion, full extension, and then
So
in terms of
if you have
lateral.
all that, why did you say that you probably hit 89%? Why you feel like you never were like you were before, like 100%?
So the ACL it plays a sort of a little bit of a role in flexing and extending the knee. but the kind of lion's share of the function that it serves within the knee is really preventing the lateral, um, uh, providing lateral
Mm-hmm.
stability. And so, for example, with Taitoshi, if your leg is extended uh, and your opponent's weight is on the side where you don't want your leg to bend, um, but it does bend, that can sort of be an issue. So pivoting, changing directions quickly, anytime where you have that lateral stress on a knee that can stress a knee that doesn't have an ACL and then put it at risk for moving when you don't want movement and then tearing something else. So, for example, cartilaginous tear or something like that.
Do you still feel that today, for example? Because let's say in the last few months you've been very active, training and everything. If you feel good, you feel anything.
It's funny. I mean, I just don't do certain things right anymore quite as much. But when I transitioned from doing a lot of judo to being in the hospital and sitting down a lot of the time and being at a desk, um, I started having more back pain. And interestingly, my back pain has been getting a lot better ever since I started getting back onto the mat and started rolling and doing jujitsu and judo and wrestling. So, I mean, I'm probably at risk for more acute injuries rather than, or if I would compared to if I was in the hospital. But in terms of like a nagging chronic injury I had for a long time, just my lower back, it's been better. So, I mean, goes both ways.
Interesting, very interesting. Because do you believe that lower back injury is something common in judo? Because I never heard people having problems with lower back. I've heard a lot of shoulders problems.
Right. I think the lower back injuries, by and large, are sort of the result of just a lot of aggregate damage that then presents years later down the line. Um, I mean, just kind of, I mean, lower back pain is a broad topic, but uh, probably, assuming it's not a muscle spasm or muscle pain,
Hmm.
you can have an issue with the joint itself. So the actual bone on bones, um,
But do
you can just have.
you think this is because of the falls, the amount of falls and everything?
I think it's just I mean, judo in some ways is a very unnatural, um, a lot of unnatural movements. So just uchikomis, for example, right? Rotating in, rotating out, rotating in. Just evolutionarily, people aren't meant to do that motion over and over and over, and our joints aren't equipped to deal with just that chronic stress of this very unnatural sort of motion, right? So,
Hmm.
um, if you're contorting your body and your vertebrae are rubbing against each other and create a stress, which then stimulates growth, and then uh, that can sort of reinitiate more contact, and the process can kind of just cascade onward. It can pose you at just risk for damage later down the line.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's also tough, right? Because with back pain, you can get MRIs, um, but in medicine, uh, there are two real measures of how likely something that you see is actually real or not: sensitivity and specificity that we typically use. And so, sensitivity meaning if something is wrong, what's the likelihood that a particular test is going to detect it? So, for example, let's say you had a uh, ACL tear. If I did an MRI of your knee, let's just say it's 95% sensitive. 95% of the time, the MRI is going to get it if your ACL is torn. Then you have another metric called specificity, where it's if I see something, well, what's the chance that that actually is um, real and actually the problem? So with back pain, for example, I could image your back, and even if you didn't have any back pain, I could probably identify some structures that would look just aberrant on an
Hmm.
image,
Hmm.
but in reality, they're actually not doing anything. And so with back pain, the latter tends to be the issue. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that complicates things. So who knows? I mean, a lot of people have back pain, and we don't actually know if what we see on imaging is actually causing the pain.
Yeah, that's a good point. Shoulders is also another very important type of muscle for judo because the amount of pull and everything. And I've seen a lot of people
Yeah,
getting injury also, shoulder injury, very common as well.
absolutely. I mean, rotator cuffs or common labral tears, I think, is probably uh, less appreciated, but just as common in judo. Just the cartilage you have in your shoulder, especially with throws like Tai Toshi, Morote Seoinage, Uchimata, where you're leaving your arm in almost uh, this position where you're placing a lot of stress on the joint, and like you're doing flies or something
Hmm.
in the gym, you don't have a lot of muscle just because you don't have much torque there, and so it places the shoulder at risk for getting hurt. So absolutely, elbows to a lesser extent, feet, as you know, ankles.
Hmm.
It's a rough sport.
Yeah. But one thing that I noticed with the good players and over time, because I started late, right? I started 3 years ago. I was already 44 when I started. So there is a lot of things that when you start young, it just is so much better because when you are young, you're not really afraid of doing things, right? So you just go for it. And
Yeah,
judo requires a lot of commitment. And I
definitely.
noticed that many times I just freeze on that final commitment, right? Because of those things, right, in my head. Because for people that really go for a throw, they use the power of the entire body to do that throw, right? It usually works that way. If you just try to muscle up, you may throw, but you're gonna put a lot of effort. And the whole idea, as you know, of judo is less effort, right?
Hmm. That's right. Um, and sort of using effort in a smart way. So, for example, if you're going to do a deadlift or something, you're going to engage pretty much every muscle in your body, right? And but if you're just going to try and bicep curl that weight up, you're not going to be able to do it. So it's a lot of the time using less effort because you're using your body in a very kind of harmonious
Yeah.
way or at a opportune time to shift your
Yeah,
opponent's momentum,
that's why I've
etc.
seen some small guys throwing big guys just because they have such a good technique.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really beautiful, I think, to watch. I mean, guys a lot better than myself or I mean, it's just yeah,
Yeah, the other day
stunning a lot
that
of the
we
time.
were shooting at the hidden gym, I mean, you lift me effortless, and I'm 200 pounds, right? And you are way less than that.
Yeah, and it's I mean, you'd be able to do the same thing to somebody that was 400 pounds, you know?
It's the hip
Uh
position, man. The hip is everything.
it's the
People
hips.
don't realize how important the hip is
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's
for both
I
for
mean,
judo and jiu-jitsu because jiu-jitsu use a lot of hip too.
yeah, that's a good point. And I didn't quite appreciate that until I really started going with these just high level BJJ athletes. So I was rolling with Igor Pavia, and just I remember thinking, wow, it's this what I would try to do to somebody standing up in terms of just where I'm going to place my weight, where I'm going to time my movements, and sort of just direct my body. He was able to do that just so gracefully on the ground where I didn't even have a chance. I was
Yeah,
just
the amount of
I was
pressure,
trying
the
to shift
amount
his
of pressure
exactly,
is ridiculous.
and it's a lot of hips and balance, just like standing. I'm not as good on the ground, and so it was harder for me to appreciate it for a long time. And as judo guys, we don't get the opportunity to go with high level BJJ guys all the time. But man, I mean, something
But
else.
did you, when you were practicing judo, did you do a lot of newaza, or you never really was a newaza guy?
No, I was never that good at it, to be honest. Uh, it's a regret I have. But I mean, some guys are just able to kill it down there and win a lot of matches that they otherwise wouldn't have. but
Yeah, I noticed that. I
I don't
noticed that the
know.
Japanese they invested a lot in the Waza for the Olympics. I watched
Yeah,
some of the videos of them training. They cross training with BJJ this time around, which is pretty cool.
it's a good point and something that I mean we should all be doing. Uh, Brazil especially. uh, I don't I forget exactly um, who said it was one of the judo coaches. Maybe it was Flavia Canto
Oh, Flavio,
said
yeah,
that
Flavio, yep, yep.
yeah, um, people from people from Brazil or Brazilian athletes. Uh, he said like we should never be losing on the
Yeah,
ground
yeah,
just because
yeah. But
of
and
all
he
the
he
access that
he
they
is
had to.
absolutely right. And sadly, on the Olympics, we lost some matches on the ground, which is pretty shame because we every Brazilian judoka should dominate the ground for sure.
Oh, and
And
a lot of them
Flavio
do.
Flavio is amazing on the ground.
Yeah, he's incredible. Yeah, it's and you can see it just yeah, like you said, Japanese are just their game continues to evolve, right? And I mean, I feel like they kind of went through a little bit of a lull back in, I don't know, 2000 and I don't know, 8, 9, 10, 11, where they didn't quite look as good as they maybe 2008, 9, 10. They didn't look as good as they had been for a long time.
Yeah, but
Um,
now they have Ono,
then
which is already considered the best judoka of all times.
yeah, the guy's a monster. I mean, and not just Ono, Abe, right? So 6 kilo,
But
52 kilo.
Ono, man, is one thing that I notice about Ono is that he trains a lot with weights. I've seen him doing one arm roll with 160 pounds, 160 pounds. I mean, it's a lot for that guy or that size, you know.
Yeah, and I hear he just I mean typically right when you go with a Japanese judoka really high level they're known for being very flowy, right, very technical. I was talking to one of my friends the other day. His name's Kyle Takeda. He's a really good judoka. He had the opportunity to train with
Oh,
Ono
really? Wow.
in Japan. Yeah, before he had made his I think first junior world team. So before he had really kind of jumped onto the radar, but the first thing he said was the guy is just a monster, and he grabs you, and yeah, his technique's obviously amazing, but physically he's just so strong. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you can
And
have
I've seen a documentary about also it was really focused on the flexibility that he has for his ultimata because he touches
right,
his head on the ground. It's crazy. I mean, he goes all
right,
the
a
way.
lot of the time, yeah, and he's not a tall guy either, right? But he's still bombing everybody with this throw. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like the guy just doesn't lose. It's
Yeah.
quite something.
In your opinion, going back to your experience and just being around so many people, why we don't really have a constant good judo team for the Olympics in US? Because
Yeah,
this
that's
year was not really good, right? I mean, all other years we did okay, but I mean we are not on top three all the time.
right. Yeah, it's a good question. I've thought about this uh, quite a lot, and I change my mind every once in a while. I think for one thing is just in a lot of these countries, their population um, may be smaller, but judo's more popular, and just the amount of national training sites is geographically um, just much closer than in the U.S., right, where you have to drive
Well,
uh,
yeah, at
eight
the same
hours.
time, I think about BJJ, right? BJJ arrived in the US way later than judo, and
Right.
now you have way more BJJ academies than judo. Uh, in the, I mean, just in
Yeah.
my town here, can count at least five BJJ academies and probably one judo. So it's
Right.
huge the difference. We probably in the DFWA we probably have more than 10 or 20 BJJ academies and probably three judo ones. So why
Yeah,
BJJ gain that much of momentum if it is not even an Olympic sport, right? You think about that.
yeah. I would think that just because of just the UFC and the Gracies, right? Um, you have this guy, Royce Gracie, who just goes in and sort of proves to the world that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu uh, is the thing to do if you want to fight, right? And so that kind of it's you have the people who just want to be the best martial artist they can doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but then you also have the type of people that can appreciate, oh, wait a minute, it's not just the biggest, strongest guy that's going to win a fight. It's going to be the guy who trains and puts in the time and is clever in terms of just figuring out creative solutions to solving problems. Um, and so you get people that are interested like that. And then now I think
There is
just
one other
in
aspect that you are not counting on, that many people that I interview in the past and that I talk with, they also emphasize. BJJ was since the beginning, they were really good on the marketing and commercially speaking, right? They know how to do business, right? If you think about the amount of gyms that we have today, they have a curriculum, they have a schema. The student goes, he knows exactly which belt, what he needs to do in order to get the next level. So there is a curriculum, and from the
yeah,
marketing perspective, that's pretty good. People want that. In judo, many times, it's like, well, you don't really have a very well established curriculum. It's not very clear how things go. Even the tournaments, they mix up people with different belts. Something that never happens with BJJ, at least going through the IBJJF, right? So there is this aspect as well. BJJ was able to commercially do better.
yeah, that's a good point. I'm less familiar with all the kind of commercial aspects and the advertising and everything. But I mean, I'm sure you're right, and I'm sure just the sort of aptitude they had for kind of capitalizing on the fact that Royce and the Gracies were so successful. I'm sure it's purposeful, right, in terms of um, using that as an opportunity to kind of propel the sport forward. I mean, in many ways, that's exactly what kind of inspired Royce to go fight in the UFC,
Hmm.
right? Was to advertise Brazilian
Yeah,
Jiu-Jitsu.
and to
Um,
prove that the martial art was
right.
effective, regardless of the
Yeah.
size.
And I think too, I mean, in judo, it's less comfortable a lot of the time. I mean, standing up, right? It doesn't feel good taking falls. It's more dangerous in terms of injury and the likelihood for it to get injured. And so, I mean, it's a perishable uh, time frame that you have that all of a sudden you're going to stop getting to take falls. You're going to stop being able to do rendori.
Mm.
And I think in jujitsu, you don't have to stop quite as quickly as you would in judo.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
there is one advantage in judo, at least from the career perspective, is that you can train and aim to go to the Olympics, which is everyone's dream when you are an athlete of Olympic sport, right? The Olympic is
Right.
really the main thing. Everyone wants to be there, and every parent that has a kid that is practicing a sport, swimming, running, or whatever, they were like, they at some point they might say, "Wow, can you imagine if he could go to the Olympics?" We don't have
Absolutely.
BJJ in Olympics, right? So I think
Right.
judo still has a lot of potential to grow more and more. And I noticed that during the Olympics, people were going more to the gym, getting more interest. We had more people joining, which is great. But we still have some ramp up to go. Now, the other thing that other people also talk about is that there is no incentive in judo like you have for wrestlers, right? Not every single university you don't have like a scholarship for judo for the most part. I mean, probably there is one school here in Texas that has, but we don't hear that very often, like you have for football, like you have for wrestling, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think jujitsu has many scholarships
Yeah,
too, right? And
none,
so
none.
that's hasn't so so maybe that contributes, but at the same time, uh, jujitsu's managed to kind of continue to gain popularity, and I think judo is too. But clearly, you don't need scholarships in order to continue to just
Incentivize
exactly.
and improve the quality because we already
I
have a lot of good BJJ athletes in US, a lot.
right, yeah. I mean, just all the Danaher
Hmm.
guys, right? Um, I mean, yeah, Gordon Ryan, all
Yeah,
those.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think the gi probably too. Um, in America, right? You can start off doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and with the sort of um, the plan being just to do no gi if you
Hmm.
wrestled and you do
Yeah.
MMA, right? I mean, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu is obviously just it's better for mixed martial arts than judo is, and so probably get a lot more people that recognize that and go into
I'm
it
really
too.
happy that Kyla is changing this because Kyla is doing really good in MMA, just like Ronda did. I mean,
Right.
Ronda was using judo all the time when she was fighting.
Yeah. I mean, I think just uh, without a doubt, judo is helpful for MMA and can be a huge asset. And particularly, I think it's unique in terms. So this fight coming up between Islam Makhachev and Dan Hooker. Um, Last time Dan Hooker uh, lost, he fought. It was a Michael Chandler, right? This wrestler who ended up clipping him, but he he was worried about that takedown, right? And Chandler, I mean, obviously he's a good wrestler, but he has the threat of the takedown that primarily comes from the shot. Um, but with a guy like Islam Makhachev, who comes from this, just he's from Dagestan, trains with Khabib, and uh, he can just he's got excellent judo, right? So he does a lot of ouchigari. He has a lot of throws. He also has the pickups and the leg attacks, and so it just adds another element to be able to get your opponents down to the mat. Where if they're worried about a sprawl, well, you're going to have more to worry about if you can throw,
Hmm.
and then you can use that to implement, which I think is just the best finishing arsenal to have, which is Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So I think together they work really, really
Yeah,
well. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Now let's change gears a little bit here and talk about your new channel, Bad Boy Medicine. So, what is this about?
um, one of my a good friend of mine who was my roommate in medical school, we just started this channel about uh, combat sports and health and trying to merge the two and using health and sort of uh, research and um, just approaches to it to improve performance in combat sports. And that was sort of what we set out to do. And the stupid name that we picked was just kind of a silly way to, I don't know, emphasize that. And so just named it Bad Boy Medicine. And then, but yeah, just hoping to bring education about um, combat sports and sort of a like tutorial like fashion, in addition to bringing education on what you can do to just, if you have an injury, to prevent injuries, various things related to combat health. So concussions, weight management, cutting weight safely, supplements, uh, just using evidence-based research to get the most out of your workouts, stuff like that.
Do you believe that also, since I'm not sure if this is something that you learned at on school, but when you are cutting weight and you are getting more leaner, do you believe that the likelihood to get injury increases because you are eliminating water, you are, um, you are more susceptible for injury?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes is the short answer. I mean, the synovial fluid in your joints, right? The fluid that lubricates your where the two surfaces articulate and allows them to move freely. I mean, it's synovial fluid, right? It comes from it's dependent in some aspects on hydration status. I mean, there's a school of thought that thinks, well, are you at more a greater risk for withstanding a greater traumatic brain injury impact if you're dehydrated and have less of the CSF to cushion your just central nervous system in your brain. Um, I mean, yeah, I think cutting weight, and I think just anecdotally, teammates that I've had have been injured more when they've been cutting, and you can ask, well, is that confounded by the fact that they may be pushing themselves harder or overexerting themselves? And I don't know, but if I had to venture to guess, I
I
would say yeah,
personally, every time that I get injured in some way, shape, or form is always when I'm cutting weight. Yeah,
yeah,
so it's I convince myself that I just more susceptible, mainly because in bodybuilding we really cut weight. We need to be very dry. It's different than losing a weight for a fight, right? Because usually you use just water weight for the most part,
right,
and usually judo competition you weigh in one day before the fight, so you still have time to recover, which is not the same thing in
yeah,
jiu-jitsu. In jiu-jitsu you weigh in right before you went to the mat.
right. But the day before weigh-ins are somewhat of a double-edged sword though, because you can cut more weight now, right? So if you, let's say I could cut 10 pounds the day before, and then I normally wouldn't be able to fight. I'd just be too weak. But now I can have a night to rehydrate and get back onto the mat and do a reasonable job. I would cut more weight than if I had to weigh in the same day, and maybe I would only cut 5 pounds, you know? So you may not fight as uh, quickly after you weigh in, but that allows athletes to cut more weight and still have it be effective, you know?
So you believe it can also be decremental.
Well, so let's say you could pick your own weight class that you knew that you were going to be just at your
Hmm.
best, and you knew that you're going to weigh in the day before. Well, you could get away with cutting more weight than if you were to weigh in the morning of and fight, right? So like for me, 66 kilos, right? 145 is what I fought. I could cut down from 160 if I had to and
Wow.
weigh in the day before. But I mean, there's no way I could do that if that was same day weigh-ins. I couldn't lose 15 pounds and then 2 hours later walk into the
yeah,
mic. There's no
yeah,
way. Like it's
yeah.
just so I would just have to be lighter or to have to go up a weight. So it's just kind of depends how you look at it.
Did you being on that situation that you have to lose 15 pounds from one day to the other?
Towards the end of my career, I was regularly cutting down from 160. Um, and so every few weeks or so, I would have to make weight, and I don't know, 3 days out, I'd be around 160 and just have to cut those last 15 pounds, and it sucked.
Jeez,
I think,
yeah,
yeah,
that's terrible. 15 pounds
yeah.
in 3 days. Wow.
Wrestlers, jujitsu, MMA, it's an interesting little component of the sport. I think in some ways that isn't present in a lot of other ones. Just adds another kind of layer of discipline and how bad do you really want this and all that. And I don't know how I feel about it, but yeah, makes it interesting.
And nowadays, you are keeping the same weight, or you are heavier now?
Yeah, interestingly, I'm the same weight as I was towards the end of my career. I'm still about 160. I'm um, probably a little
And you're
less
probably
just.
stronger, right, muscle wise, than when you were.
It's funny you should say that. I think I feel stronger. I guess it's that old man strength. Everyone's always talking about. Hopefully, if I become a dad, I can get the dad strength too. But yeah, I feel stronger, and I noticed it when I went to go with my friend Rodney. We went and just wrestling around, and then um, I was wrestling with just some like high school kids, and I remember thinking like, wow, like I feel just way stronger than like this is a kid, and there's a clear difference in strength here, and I don't think that when I was 23 I would have noticed that quite as easily.
But do you feel like that the gas is still there? No, but
Oh, for me, I know, but I'm also not in good shape. So who knows if it would come back? I don't know. What do you think? I
I
mean,
mean, well, I don't have that much gas to be honest with you. My cardio for judo and BJJ is something that still need to improve, but it's not because I don't have cardio. I do a lot of hit workout and I can
it's just because we're
no,
Ferraris.
is I don't control. I still do not control very well um, the momentum. I'm very
Yeah.
aggressive. I'm trying to do this a lot of things at the same time. So 2 minutes in, I'm already very tired because I go full power. And Professor Leo always says, go slow. I mean, feel the guy and then start to to do some and save energy. Save energy so that
Yeah.
you can explode and then save again and then explode, and not go explosion all the time, right? So that's the part that I need to improve is really know when to explode.
It's funny. Professor Lair, I asked him just uh, what he would do if he fought some just really like young athletic guy, and then he said, "Oh, I would just yeah, whatever. I'm not gonna." He wants to scramble. I'm not gonna scramble. Fine. Like I'll take a stall in because I'm smart about this. I'm gonna wait for my opportunity. It might not come in the first minute, second minute, third minute, but uh, when it does, I'm gonna be ready. And it was just it was sort of the perspective that only a seasoned athlete that's been in the game can have, and not something that a 21 year old is going to go out and,
Yeah.
right. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have been able to sort of have that level of, I don't know, just appreciation and perspective on the sport. I would go out there and just be very amped and just go, go, go and lose sometimes to guys who did
Yeah.
have that mindset who were like,
Uh,
okay,
I,
fine,
I
tough guy, 2 minutes. Like, let's see how you're feeling at three.
yeah. And it's funny because I was watching during the Olympics a fight between Ono and some other guy. I think it was from Georgia. The guy, I think he ended up second place, something like that. I don't remember, but the guy came to him like a train, like
Is it Lasha Shadalashvili?
yeah, probably it is. It's the second place, right? The guy that got second
Yeah, and
place. Yeah,
did he get gold at 2012 or 8? I forget. But yeah, Lasha.
and he went to Ono like a crazy maniac, and Ono
Yeah.
so calm, and without moving too much, very his posture never changed. He never had a body language movement that was concerned, and he just kept, and boom, explode. So it's just freaking amazing how he can stay calm like that, and in a second, like a rocket, he just explode and throw the guy. Unbelievable.
It is crazy. Yeah. Some of these guys are just they're freaks. They're just so good. It's crazy to watch.
Yeah, it's just like Roger Gracie. Every time that I've seen Roger on huge tournaments, like Roger against Buchecha, he was extremely calm all the time, just waiting for the right moment. And I
Hmm.
think that this is a huge advantage for these athletes that are able to have a good focus and posture and breathe and be able
Totally.
to save energy for the right moment. That's a really important thing to do.
Bustamante, another good example of that. Just so laser focused and just as soon as the opportunity presents itself to strike, either stand up or pouncing on a submission, just there without any hesitation, just
Yeah.
no emotions kind of preventing you from being just anything but absolute in your attack.
Yeah, one thing that is beautiful about judo is exactly that because many times when you are doing those combos like kouchis and then you made the guy step backs and then you go to the sail, it's a matter of seconds, right? Because
Yeah,
that second is the opportunity to get in. So that's why you have to be so explosive, and that's the part that I still need to dominate. It's like when I go for a combo, I'm not really looking for the first one. I'm looking for the second one,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, it's a game of milliseconds and millimeters. It's
What
just what's that?
what was your favorite combo?
From the Olympics or just in general?
Yours, yours, your game.
Mine. I don't know. Maybe Uchimata to Sumigaishi.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah, what about yours?
traditional. I don't have a game well formed, to be very honest with you. I like to do
I don't believe that.
I like to do Osoto Sasai or Sasai
Oh,
Osoto.
that's another great one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sasai is one that is working very well with me recently, just because of the twist. I'm doing
Yeah.
a good twist, and I'm being training also with Nick Del Popolo. He taught me some
Nice.
really good techniques for Sasai. It's really effective. It works.
Yeah, I'm sure. He's got great judo. Especially just if you're in that like right on right or left on left position, just flashing the Osoto, hitting the Sasai. It's beautiful when it works.
Yeah, it is amazing, man. I love jiu-jitsu and I love judo, but from the perspective of watching, judo is just beautiful. Those throws when get in is just visually speaking is amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think so. I love watching it. But as I'm developing more knowledge for just appreciating jujitsu, I'm sort of finding the same thing with jujitsu as something that I maybe thought was less action packed. I'm now appreciating. Oh, wait a minute, no, it's the same amount of action, just different, and it's like more like a sort of chess game where you're,
Yeah, it is. It is.
yeah,
It can be very slow, but there are things happening there for sure. It,
yeah, definitely,
yeah. Uh, 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 um, because judo over time, and you know that the rules doesn't allow you to stall that much, right? In jiu-jitsu, you don't
right,
really. It's way more relaxed from that perspective because there are moments that if you watch, for example, the world's championship between two black belts, there is a lot of study that is done when they are in tango. What is
yeah,
gonna be the next move? So a fight can be stalled like for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 1 minute. It's not really moving a lot. That's never
right.
happened in judo because you get a shido.
It's kind of like chess. I think jujitsu is more like chess than judo. I think I mean, sometimes what you want to do is try to stalemate, and sometimes what you want to do is 5 moves ahead of time, force your opponent to be into a position where you're gonna take a pawn, and then you're gonna have a slight advantage, and then you can take another pawn, and then you can take a knight, then you can take a rook, and then it's checkmate. I think jujitsu is more like that than judo,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
it's more, yeah.
I agree. Totally, totally. All right, Austin. That was really cool. Great conversation.
Likewise, Yuri.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you for
was.
having me on. I'm honored, seriously.
Yeah, it was great, man. I
And
really.
I'll be seeing you in Dallas for Dallas Invitational because I'm going to be going up there with one of my athletes.
Oh, really? You have one
Yeah.
guy that's gonna compete?
Uh-huh. Yeah, just one, but we're going to go up there together.
Uh,
Rodney Shepherd. So keep an eye out for him.
that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I'm excited. It'll be my first tournament after the injury. Let's see how it goes. I mean, I really want to do well, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna use the same concept that Master Carlos Gracie once said that you never lose. You either win or you learn, right?
Beautiful. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
Exactly.
So
It's so true, man. It's so true. And when you look at it that way, sometimes losing's the bigger win, you know?
yeah, sometimes many times you learn more losing than winning. To be honest with you,
Absolutely.
yeah. All right, my friend. Thank you very much again for your time. Appreciate it. Good luck on the bad boy medicine. I think it's a
Thank
great
you.
channel. I think the content you are putting together is great, and I'm looking forward to see more.
Likewise, man. And appreciate you having me on the Overcome podcast, episode 45. Just really appreciate it. And yeah, it's I like what you're doing as well, and I'll try to spread the word too.
Absolutely, my friend. See you soon here in Dallas. Take care.
All right, man. Take care. Bye.
Bye.